Hello and welcome to More Tea Minister. My name is Ian. Today we are looking at a tea from Curious Tea. It's Shui Ya Guangxi Snow Bud. I'm sure I've mangled the pronunciation, but hopefully I will be forgiven. A couple of things make this tea stand out in respect of it being a white tea. It's not the cultivar. The cultivar is a fairly common one for white teas. It's the Fuding Large White. What makes it stand out, first of all, is the plucking style, let's call it that, which is snowbud, which translates to Shui Ya, and also it's not grown in Fuding, it's grown in Guangxi. Now, although the cultivar will be familiar, and therefore the flavour profile that the cultivar provides will be fairly familiar, there's two things making it slightly different. First of all, this plucking style, which sits somewhere between white peony and silver needles. So it's buds and the first two leaves. So it's not quite one and it's not quite the other. That provides a different flavour profile, as does the terroir. In other words, grown in Guangxi rather than Fuding. So in those two respects, this is a slight deviation from a more straightforward white tea, but I'm very interested in finding out what this flavour profile is like. Before we get on to doing that, we are going to take a look at the packaging, as we always do with Curious Tea, and then we'll take a look at the tea inside. So see you in a moment. So here we are looking at the packaging for our Shui Ya Guangxi Snowbud. This is a white tea from China. I always like to look at Curious Tea's packaging because it manages to combine a use of wording and symbolism and colour, to get the point across as to where the tea is from and what style of tea is, and so on and so forth. So we have at the bottom of the picture here what a kind of stylized boat. I was about to say what kind, but I'd be guessing. The white patch here lets you know that it's a white tea, and then you have colour patterns and some variation, which again lets you know it's from China, as well as obviously you've got the national flag down at the bottom there. I always do like to look at Curious Tea's packaging. So now let's move on to look at the tea inside. Back in a mo. Here we are looking at our Shui Ya Guangxi Snowbud White Tea. So what we're looking at is a combination of buds and the first two leaves. I'm going to assume, as per normal, that means that the two things, or the two different aspects, are actually connected. To look at, it doesn't look quite like a standard silver needle tea, because what I would normally call the silver needles are slightly more irregular in shape. In terms of the colour profile, the colour palette, it's pretty much what you see. It's a good balance between darker green and paler green, but it is almost all a variation on the theme of green, or I suppose you could say silvery green. There's a slightly discoloured patch here. I don't know if that's something that's oxidized a little more. But the colour profile isn't uniform, but it is, I don't see any great signs of oxidation. And the material itself looks like slender but oddly shaped or variously shaped silver needles. So and the smell of the tea, I would have said, was very similar to a silver needle. It's got that kind of herbal quality, but it's a little bit floral and a little bit fruity. So I'm very much looking forward to sampling this tea. Let's move on to that now. See you in a mo. Hello and welcome to part 3A of our video, where we review this tea Western style. This is Shui Ya Guangxi Snowbud from Curious Tea, which is a fairly distinctive plucking style, and it's not the standard, if you want to put it that way, terroir. It's Guangxi rather than Fuding. So I'd be very interested to know what the flavour profile for this is going to be. Curious Tea's note on the packaging, the sort of boiled down ones, they focus on herbaceous, butter, savoury, with some toasted seaweed and salted plums. That's reminding me of something, but I'm not quite sure what. Now, There is something a little herbaceous, herbal there. Something a little savoury, but there's a lot of caramel sweetness there, which I would expect from a white tea. So let's see. Sweetness on the cup. Let's take a look at the colour, because that's a little more intense than your standard silver needle colour. I should point out that this is 80 degrees centigrade, so quite low even for white tea. Sometimes that's 85. For 3 to 4 minutes, we've gone for 3.5, and it's a 1 gram to 100 mils ratio of leaf to water. So let's try this. Ooh. That's really interesting, yes. There's definitely a herbal quality though. It's a sort of slight vegetal bitterness, but only very, very slight. It's sort of adding to the picture. It reminds me of the candy coating on something like a licorice sweetie, where it's sweet, but you can tell there's that more savoury licorice flavour. When you smell one of those sweeties, you get the sweetness, the candy, and you get the savoury underneath. This tastes like those smell. Very smooth, really, really smooth. Yes, that's really interesting because it's smooth. There's that slightly savoury, slightly bitter note, and it's herbal. So it isn't just a big mass of sweetness or freshness. It's very different. In terms of intensity and the duration of the flavour, it's still on the palate. It's not fading away. And it's pretty intense. I would say that's really well balanced. Yep, that's a really interesting flavour, and I'd be very curious to see how that manifests itself in a Gongfu tasting, which we'll move on to now. Back in a moment. Hello again, and welcome to the final part of our video, where we're going to review this tea through a Gongfu session. A reminder, this is from Curious Tea. It's a Shuiya Guangxi Snowbud, and it's a white tea. The brewing parameters for the Western were a low temperature and a slightly elongated brewing time. However, that seemed to work very nicely for the tea. And what came out of the Western brewing was something herbal and slightly bitter, slightly vegetal, along with a great deal of smoothness and a kind of candy sweetness, kind of rolling all together. It wasn't a blast of freshness, and it wasn't an almost syrupy sweetness like some white teas provide. So I have over here that remains of the Western style brewing, just as a kind of point of reference, not to taste it, but to have a sniff, if need be, to remind myself what's coming through each steeping. And I say that because with that bittersweet note, I would hope that that would transfer through the Gongfu at the same time. You wouldn't want that sort of slightly bitter note all by itself, although maybe it comes across more herbal done that way. So the parameters are 3 grams of tea, 50 mils per steeping. We'll keep the water at 80, that seemed to work. And if need be, we can always bump it up if it doesn't seem to be working Gongfu. And I've got my stopwatch, which I don't often use unless I'm comparing two light teas like for like, but best practice and all that. So there is our leaf, and we'll just see where this gets us with 20 seconds to start with. The leaf is floating on the surface. Ah, there it is, that's it. Submerging, if we can put it that way. Let's see where that gets us with 20 seconds. For a second there, I thought I hadn't bought the second jug. That's all I would need. There, 20 seconds. Definitely herbal, almost slightly medicinal, in a good way. I mean, it's a sort of added richness rather than a chemical scent. Interesting. Colour-wise, that is very similar to a silver needle white tea. It's a silver colour, or at least a white tea. Actually, no, I tell a lie. It's silvery, but there's a distinct yellow tinge to that. On the nose, that's slightly herbal, medicinal quality. That's really what's coming off. And much the same on the cup. The herbal quality is just in the background, and it's sweet, almost a sort of a mild caramel sweetness. That's just coming on after that medicinal quality. The two go really, really well together. I'm going to see if I can smell. Yeah, there's that herbal medicinal quality slightly on the Western, but it doesn't come through as a distinct flavour. It must be that bitterness. So let's try this for this time. We might take this to 25 and see where that gets us. All right. It is interesting that 80 degrees is really bringing a lot of that through. I didn't think it would work quite so well. I need to pour that tea off. That's a bit of a shame. There we go. That's 25. Didn't bring a wastewater jug. My bad. So, more herbal and medical. Medicinal, not medical. No sweetness coming through there. Colour-wise, a little more yellow, but that's still quite pale. It's the herbal medicinal that's coming through there. Be curious to know if it's one of these that's viscous at all. It didn't feel it. Actually, it's leaving a trace on the cup, so... Oh yeah, the medicinal quality is really strong there. Yeah, that herbal medicinal quality is it's still incredibly smooth. I think the brain is saying because there's a slight edge to it, that it's just going to be tannins and bitterness, but it's not. It's just smooth. It's immensely smooth, slightly vegetal/herbal, that medicinal tang or bitterness to it, and yet it remains really, really well balanced and very smooth. Okay. I know that shouldn't be the wastewater, but it is. So let's push this for a final one to 30. Funnily enough, see if you can see how they're plumping up. Not a great deal because they're quite slender. They feel a little softer, but they took a little while to get there. The second steeping, definitely. They're quite savoury. They're quite savoury, these leaves. Not so much fresh, but definitely herbaceous. Now, that tasting note is spot on. Right, final steeping, 30 seconds. At least. Yes, that's a really unusual combination, that sort of slight edge to it, that herbal medicinal edge, but also phenomenally smooth at the same time. So let's see where 30 seconds gets us. I can see already it's still quite pale. Or let me rephrase that, the intensity of the colour hasn't changed. So we haven't overdone it, certainly. On the lid. I think I should have kept the lid on to keep the steam in. The medicinal edge is there. Oh wow, it's really... It's not floral as such, but it reminds me of a kind of plant that I can't pin down. but definitely a sort of medicinal edge. But still immensely smooth. It's smooth and it's herbaceous slash medicinal. I wouldn't want to brew that for any longer. You could maybe go warmer to push it, but I wouldn't brew it for any longer. It's just on the edge there, I think. That's a really, really interesting tea. That combination of medicinal and incredibly smooth. Not smooth as in thin or bland. It's just a kind of mouthfeel of smoothness. It's not sweet and it's not a blast of freshness. So it's not like other white teas. There's no sort of hyper intense one flavor or another. It's a really tasty mingling of that herbaceous and being immensely smooth. It's almost like a kind of tonic or cordial sort of impression. And I think that I choose that word carefully because you could drink this as a pick me up. You could drink this as a refreshing light white tea, something with an edge. I would go with that. It's really good. Please don't think edge means anything astringent or bitter or something awry. It's not going to pucker the mouth, but it just adds something. It's still there. It's beyond the edge is this medicinal plant quality. I couldn't pin down what it is. It reminds me. Yeah, I've had this plant at some time. All in all, really, really interesting. I haven't checked to see how many other places are selling snowbud white teas, apart from when I did a quick Google search as what is a snowbud white tea, what distinguishes it, and a few vendors came up. So you'd have no difficulty in getting hold of one of these, although as always, I would urge you, I say this as a matter of courtesy, to go through Curious Tea if you want to try one of these. In terms of Guangxi snowbud white teas, I know that makes it a little more specific, but as always, there were plenty of white teas from outside Fuding. We've had a few ourselves, and it tastes great. It's really interesting. The flavour's still lingering. So it's a hearty recommendation. Try it if you want a white tea with a kind of herbal, medicinal twang to it. It's not a punch. It's not intense and in your face. It's more refreshing than I find most white teas, which are just really kind of luxurious. So it's a hearty recommendation, and it remains for me only to say happy steeping and God bless.